I've been at the Post in October, it'll be 25 years. Can't believe it's been that long, but I've worked in a lot of different sections in the paper. But in 2004, when I had the opportunity to jump to the food section, I, planted myself in the soon-to-be editor's office, and that was Jean McManus at the time, and said, really, I'm not leaving your office until you let me be in the food section. I had worked, a little bit about me, I had previously worked at the journal newspapers. It looks like I've got a demographic that may remember them. In the suburban area, I was in the Virginia journals. I started working in the lifestyle section. Ended up doing some of that, including food. But then I was in news, and then, once I had kids and went part-time and full-time, it just seemed to make more sense to come to the Post. And so when I finally started in the food section, it just made me feel, I was one of those people that saved big stacks of yellowing things in my house, and I'd been reading the food section ever since I came to Washington, and that was in late 1979. And so I knew there was a lot of history there, but never really had the time. With daily journalism, sometimes it's just all you can do to sort of do the daily job week to week, and even if it's a weekly section, you get in a groove and you don't really have that much of a chance to look back. But whenever I could, I would look in the archives. We've got sort of deep archives that are on microfiche and microfilm, with a rolling thing in a room that's kind of dusty, which I love. And we also have more stuff online, accessible through tools like ProQuest. So once I started, every once in a while I would look up and see, well, how many stories have we done about tomatoes, or how many times have we done an entertaining column or something like that? So I had a little bit of an idea. And a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, just when the newsroom was starting to, what euphemism I will call downsize, I sent a memo to Catherine Weymouth, the publisher, and I said, the New York Times has a cookbook and the Washington Post never has had a cookbook. Why is that? I would love to do a cookbook. If you just gave me a year, I could, delve deep and really sort of do a start to finish we don't have the history of the New York Times as far as how far back it goes and how much food coverage we had, but it's a pretty interesting bit of a Washingtoniana, Washington food culture. There is such a thing. Even Mark Furstenberg would agree to that, I think. And so I'm your gal. So what do you think? And she kicked it around with her marketing vice presidents and said, we're not really into the book thing right now, and I'm not sure that big books sell. And it's like, yeah, they do. They're on my desk every day, piling up from a lot of other people. So that went away. But then a couple of years ago, we got approached by a very small publishing house called Time Capsule Press, who ended up doing this book with us. They are former West Coast journalists, one from the San Francisco Chronicle and one from the LA Times. And they hit on kind of a good idea, I thought, which was to repurpose newspaper content. I mean, it's good, it's out there. Just because it ran in newsprint that's going to fall apart in 10 years doesn't mean it's not valid. So they'd done a couple of books with each one of those newspapers. They wanted to come to the Washington Post. The Post did a market research survey, and guess which kind of book Washingtonians wanted to read before any other kind of book? Yes. So I was back in play. Joe Yonan, who's been the food and travel editor for the past 6 years, had just announced at the time that he was going to take a year off, go do a book, live with his sister and brother-in-law in Maine, do the homesteading thing, which all sounded great. But could I fill in for him as food editor and do the cookbook at the same time? Well, sure I could, because I really wanted to do the cookbook. And I ended up doing a lot of the cookbook, most of the cookbook, on my own time. So in 2012, I think I spent maybe like 8 weekends doing weekend kind of things. And the rest of the time I was in the office. And a lot of that time, Tom Seetsema, the food critic, is there. I found out he works on Sundays. I didn't think I ever knew that before. So the thing to do, obviously, for me was to try to figure out, there were constraints. You'll notice that the book, and this always pains me a little bit, is the size that it is. I think I ended up preparing and testing twice as many recipes as 170 or so that are in the book. But, as it happens, they had, it gets printed in China, because of they have a same size constraints, whatever. I had to work within the confines of this. I'm not complaining. I still wanted to do the book. So it was a matter of how would I fit some format that encompassed so much of Washington, the Washington Post food section, in a book that was going to be a couple hundred pages. And then I came up with the idea of readers' favorites, because we now run statistics online every month about what readers see online, the recipes that they use most. We get these, very detailed printouts. It doesn't have your phone numbers or NSA addresses or any of that stuff. But it does have, how many people looked at the lemon and honey chicken, and what days they looked at it. It's got kind of a fever chart. It tells me if it came out on Wednesday, they really looked at it Wednesday and Thursday, and spiked again a couple days later. And there are some recipes, drifting a little bit, there's some recipes in that sort of top 5 online stats that we run every month that are from 8 years ago, because somebody sees it in the list and they're like, oh, it was Rose Berenbaum's flaky cream cheese pie crust. That's the one that I want to make. So I end up coming up with different ways to say, and here's this recipe from 2005 that Rose did, but everyone loves it so much, it's on the most popular list again. The reader recipe format, the reader's favorite recipes, what I did was I put notices in the newspaper. I put stuff online. When we have a weekly online chat, does anyone come and chat with us on Wednesdays from noon to 1? Excellent. It's called Free Range, and we'd love to have you. I guess now you might have to pay for it if it's not one of your freebies for the month, but it's well worth it. We have a lot of fun, and it's very loosey-goosey online. A lot of times we have chefs. We had Brian Voltaggio last week. Sort of depends on what's in this section. I think I sort of lost track of how many, but I got at least 400 or 500 emails, faxes, PDFs, things written on recipe cards that people had transcribed from the Post and kept in their files. They made another copy on a recipe card to give me. I was really quite taken. It just endears me. The food community that keeps in touch with the Post is, they're like my favorite people. They're my people. And then it was a process of kind of winnowing down what recipes were going to go in there. And if I wasn't able to run all the recipes, but sometimes there was a recipe that really struck a chord that came through and was mentioned by more than 2 or 3 people. And I thought, well, I have to put that in there. The old recipes before, I think it was 1987, Phyllis Richmond, everybody remembers Phyllis Richmond, who's doing great, decided that we needed to test the recipes because there was kind of a famous recipe. I think it might have been for a chicken or something. It was something that actually exploded in people's ovens. And she thought, we better be testing these recipes, and God bless her. So we've been testing them ever since. And, I'd have to say, even when we're testing recipes out of cookbooks that you figure, of course they were all tested, right? Sometimes they don't test up. She's shaking her head. Yeah, you learn from experience. So some things that you run across, but we test them all at least once, sometimes twice or 3 times. And that's why you'll almost always see the recipes in the paper will say for a source line adapted from, because we might tweak it, we might take out an ingredient or add more of an ingredient, we might rewrite it in our own language and style to make it a little clearer to understand. So that's why it says that. So it was just a process of going through and picking these recipes. I have volunteer, I do a lot of testing, but I couldn't do that much testing. I have volunteer testers, some of whom work in the building and some of whom are just dedicated Post readers, and they'll actually, I send them the recipes and then they'll test them, they'll bring in a sample, they give me their notes, and we reimburse for ingredients. So I've had people that I've met at, functions like this that say, I want to be a tester, I would love to be a tester. And like, if you want to schlep it downstairs, down to the Post, I'm all for it. Please do. And I've met some really, interesting, nice food people that way. So it was a process of testing things, of seeing which things were the best, and then filling in with other recipes from our online database. Does anyone know we have an online database? It's called Recipe Finder. Right now it's got about 5,300 recipes in it, with a lot more that haven't been published. And we're working on, I'm happy to say, and you're the first people I'm sharing it with, a total redesign of our recipe website, which will make the pictures bigger, make the recipes easier to read. It might roll out as early as September. Keep it on your hat. But I'm really excited about it. The best thing that will come out of it is it will be searchable through Google. Sometimes, if I even know the name of a Washington Post recipe and I look it up on Google, it's like maybe the 8th one down, and I can't figure out why, but it's because this old database didn't really have a good search SEO function, as they call it. So that'll be a really, really good thing. So we're testing recipes, we're shooting recipes. We have a tiny little photo studio. Some recipes we were able to use from photo shoots when we originally did the story, but things like icy spicy watermelon soup, which you're going to try today, we shot that like a week before the book was due, just in the studio. And I've been working with Deb Lindsay, who was a former Post photo editor. And she went freelance. She shoots weddings mostly, but every other week she comes into the studio and we shoot food together. So we sort of snuck it in. There wasn't really much of a budget for it. Again, I'm telling tales out of school. So a lot of the things, I would say, unless it's on a plate and it has kind of an outdoor or other feel to it, a lot of the stuff we just shot in the studio. So, and then there were other things that I filled in from the recipe database that used to be, there used to be a rating function for readers, so I would pick recipes that had 5-star ratings on them. I threw a couple of my favorites in there because I get to do that because I'm the recipe editor, right? And so that's how the book came together. And it took, I would say, maybe 8 months, and then got packed off to the publisher. And I can also say, I'm breaking all kinds of news today, that it's going into a second printing. So it'll be, that'll be done. There were a couple of like typos and things in the book that I would like to really take back, but they're getting fixed in the second printing. So there's nothing horrible in a recipe, but just clean up some language and make things easier. So that'll be done, printed, I think, by the end of September. So to sort of gear up for holiday sales. So I've been blathering. The other thing that I brought today for you to try is probably something, when's the last time anybody wrapped their lips around a piece of fudge? Like, nobody. It's not really a treat that we enjoy anymore, but I brought one that is a recipe of Mamie Eisenhower's. It's in the book, and it's called $1 Million Fudge. And the cool thing was, when I was going back through the microfiche and the microfilm and the ProQuest, I found this newspaper article that went with the recipe. She was supposed to show up at a ladies' luncheon for Republican Women's Club in 1967, a December luncheon, and she couldn't make it. It was at the Washington Golf and Country Club. I don't even know, is it still around? I'm not a country club gal. Anyway, she couldn't attend, but she had at everybody's place when they got there a little gold foil wrap piece of her fudge. So this is fudge. I mean, these were ingredients like evaporated milk and salted butter, German sweet chocolate, which is still in grocery stores. When's the last time anybody cooked with that? There are these bars of Baker German sweet chocolate. Like, it's just chocolate that has sugar in it. It's not specifically made for German chocolate cakes or anything like that. But they're ingredients I think that everybody had in their pantry, which was kind of the beauty of it. It was very, very popular. It had marshmallow cream, and it's like the fudge. It's like I whipped up some just this morning, wrapped it up to give you the feel of you could be at a golf and country club luncheon. So we can just pass that around, and you guys can take a couple. And let's see what else. The cookbook sort of rolled out, and we had an event at the Post. Post Points readers were invited to come first. It sold out so quickly, they sort of doubled the amount of people and moved it to a larger venue in the building. And it was a lot of fun. I got together some of the former food section editors, like Nancy McKeon. Jean couldn't make it that day. Judy Haveman. Phyllis also couldn't make it that day. Tom Sietsema, who started off as an assistant for Phyllis, and he was testing a lot of recipes for her during her tenure. Joe was there. It was a lot of fun. I mean, people got to find out things. There have been, newspaper's sort of a alive thing. When an editor comes in, they sort of put their own stamp on things. So you might remember a feature that might not be there anymore, but you wonder where it came from. Like, is anyone familiar with the annual cookie issue, which has been going on for... It's always fun. Everybody always tells us you got to do it in November because I have a cookie club and we need to know what we're making. But the first week in December is when we usually have to do it. And this year it's also like that. So the cookie issue was Judy Haveman, who was there for just a year between 2005 and 2006. When it came to holiday time, she said, I just want to see cookies on the front page. I just want to see nothing but cookies. So the art director ran with it. We filled the section up with 25 recipes, and it's been like that ever since. A very, very popular thing. And it's one reason why you won't find a lot of cookie recipes in this book, because we're hoping, now that we know how to do this, that we'll put out a cookie book, and we'll do some ebooks, some special things, groups of healthful recipes, groups of quick dinner in minutes kind of recipes, which has been a tradition since the 1980s that I now do every week.